Hello, everybody. My name's Jim, and this is my reading wrap up for June 2023. It's also my birthday today, but that doesn't matter. We're just going to jump into the first book, which is unfortunately a DNF for me. It's Siren Queen by Nevo. First of all, I want to say that this is not my last book from Nevo. I want to read her novella series. They're much shorter, and I feel like I could get into them a little bit more. But with this one, I couldn't follow the plot in the beginning enough. I know that a number of people said that there is a bigger plot that happens sort of later in the book, but don't really know if I want to get there. I don't want to get through all of this stuff because I feel like the beginning is important, and if I'm confused by it and if I can't follow it, then there's no way I'm going to be able to keep up at the end. There was a lot of name dropping and sudden magic. I couldn't keep up with the people. There were a couple that I could remember and that I could kind of gauge their personalities. If I can go into her novella series and kind of get an idea of her writing style a little bit more from start to finish, then I might pick up this book again later and give it another shot. The cover is beautiful. I know that a lot of people do enjoy this book, but it just wasn't for me. The Puzzle Master by Danielle Trussoni. As of this recording, I have not finished it yet, but I am far enough along to feel comfortable enough to review it, and I am definitely going to finish it by July 1st. So, no big deal there. This book started off so strong, and I wanted to like it. It was a new release this month. I don't know which date it was, but I was excited for it. The problems I had, though, were that, oh man, there's a list. The author committed so many sins that I could not forgive. So I'm just going to list them out. First of all, there was a lot of exposition, particularly around the main character's backstory, and that's all well and good. I didn't mind knowing more about him and how he received his injury and the things that happened after that, but the problems really started rising up when that exposition was repeated again. So we could have all that information at one point, and then he would explain his situation again the next chapter. And while I understand that books sometimes do have those reminders tossed around here and there throughout the novel, it seemed really weird to have it again, back to back, in consecutive chapters. And I feel like in every case that this happened, because it happened more than one time, it would have been better just to leave it in the conversation that he was having with someone else, or if it was another character, a conversation with that character, having it with someone else as well. In some cases, it ruined surprises. I just felt like I wanted to see it happen later. One good thing about mysteries and thrillers is that they need to be surprising, and the thing is that if she would have kept it later, it wouldn't have felt out of place. I think that it would have been so well written, and it would have gotten much more of a reaction out of me than, oh, well, you already told me this, so it really doesn't matter that I know this now. So when other characters are being surprised by information, I'm just like, okay, well, I knew that. Another problem that I had was that many of the characters sounded the same, and it was very old-fashioned. The main character, Mike Brink, he is a puzzle designer for the New York Times. So just by saying that, you kind of understand that it is more of a modern book, but the dialogues just felt so old-fashioned. I think as far as the dialogue was concerned, it seemed like every character was trying way too hard to be either super smart or super villainous or something. It didn't work out. It didn't feel natural. Also, I understand that mysteries and thrillers are plot focused, which is fine, but is it too much to ask to have characters whose personalities and motivations are consistent? Please. These characters, like, there was some suspension of disbelief, but over time, I got over it. I couldn't suspend my disbelief anymore. I was just like, these characters are doing things that are out of the ordinary for the personality that has been set for them. It only served the plot. It didn't serve the characters at all. And I really want to give examples, but I can't because they are spoilers. I might upload a spoiler review for this book just because I can't keep it in. It's just really hard to keep this to myself. But like, I have receipts, and I don't like knocking a book if I don't have receipts to back them up. But I have receipts, and I am busting at the seams to tell you, but I'm not going to do that in this one. But there were so many times where the characters did certain things that just did not match their personalities. It did not match their motivations and why they did or did not do certain things before that point. It went against it. It was contradictory. I didn't like it. It took me out of the story. And then finally, the last thing that bugs me, it's a pet peeve in a lot of stories, is that the author bragged about the main character so many times. So this guy, he's a genius. He was called to a police station or a prison to help an inmate or to help solve a puzzle that an inmate created that he finds out is the beginning, or more or less is connected to why she's in prison and what her story is and how events really unfolded there. So the whole story is about, figuring that out and solving the puzzle. But at every turn, the author told us that this man was so smart. He was smarter than everybody in the room, even though he would not make some of the smartest decisions. Oh, he was a genius. He was so smart. and I'm just sitting here like, I know that he's not saying it about himself, but because it's in his perspective, it makes me think he is, and therefore I think he's bragging, and I don't like him very much. So she could have done without all that bragging about the character that she created and crafted, because it did not serve him very well at all. So overall, I was going to be a little bit generous and rate this book 3 stars. I haven't done it yet, obviously, because I haven't finished it as of this recording. But when I'm done, unless things pick up and come around towards the latter few chapters of the book, then I'm thinking I'm going to give it 2 stars. Unfortunately, just because all of that just it takes me out of the book, it takes me out of the story, and I just didn't enjoy it as much as I hoped I would. I'm so sorry for anybody who enjoyed this and was anticipating this book for the month of June. I don't mean to poop all over it. Maybe you'll enjoy it, but I had a hard time. The Red Tent by Anita Diamond. This is my next to last book for my Media Mirror Challenge. There's only one more book to go after this, and this one, I enjoyed it. If you are not a fan of childbirth, and I mean detailed descriptions of childbirth, like if you don't like that, then this will not be the book for you, because if you don't know the story of Joseph, Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat, if you ever saw that musical, or you read the story in the Bible, there were many brothers and they had to come from somewhere. So there is a lot of childbirth there. And then obviously the story is about, I call her Dinah, but in the story she's called Dina. So for the sake of this review, I'm just going to call her Dina. Leave in the comments below, do you call her Dinah or do you call her Dina if you're familiar with the story? Either way, she is the only daughter of this army of children. I didn't mind this. I didn't mind the childbirth because in a way it helped solidify the mother's personalities. It's not something that I ever really expect to talk about again. And I feel like since it was such a big part of this story that I should talk about it. But the fact that the author was able to maintain each character's personality through something as agonizing and painful as childbirth, I was impressed. And it really helped solidify those characters and help round them more than just, the common introductory stuff that you get with characters all the time. I loved Dina's mother and her aunties. Those were my favorite characters in the story just because of how well-rounded they were in the beginning. As for the rest of the story, when we got into Dina's part, I much preferred her growing up, her coming into womanhood, than when she was an adult towards the end. Just because by that point, I feel like a lot of the events in her life had already shaped her. But I will say that the ending wasn't boring. There just wasn't as much growth and as much to follow as there was towards the beginning of her life. Now, there is one thing that I want to point out about some of the reviews for this book. There were a lot of liberties taken. This is not a one-to-one comparison to the Bible. So if you are a Bible purist, I wouldn't not recommend this book, but I would tell you to approach it with caution and with an open mind so that you're not let down thinking that this would be a perfect comparison to the biblical story. Anita Diamond did take some liberties to make it a bit more exciting, and for me, that's okay. Like, I'm not bothered by that at all. But I know some people might be, so that's something to look out for. And number two, I saw some comments about this being a misandrist novel. I know that it was marketed as a feminist novel, but I had no problem with how the men were presented in this book. And maybe that's just me. Maybe I overlooked something that other people might see. So if you read this book and you see it that way, you know, definitely leave a review and let me know so that I can see it a bit more clearly. But I've read misandrist books just as I've read misogynistic books. Both are awful. Both are not enjoyable to read because I don't like reading books where one gender is presented as worthless and stupid. It's just not fun for me. And I didn't get that with this. Oh, and I did say that I was going to call out and tag Bandana Book Mom when I reviewed this. Talia, if this sounds good for you, give it a try. If an Egyptian Cannot Speak English by Nornega. I didn't know what to expect with this one. I thought that this was going to be a bit more historical fiction, but it was a bit more romance. This was a surprise for me because, again, I didn't know what to expect. It's a short novel. It's a dual perspective with two unnamed characters. You have the American girl and you have the boy from Shobachit. I can't get that sound right with my throat, but I'm trying the best I can. I loved the American girl's perspective. I enjoyed everything that she had to say, her growth, the way that her politics were shaped upon leaving America and going to Egypt. She is an Egyptian American. I did not, however, enjoy the perspective of the boy from Shobachit. And there are many reasons why I didn't, and I feel like I can't really go into them too much, but he always came across as the type of guy who wouldn't laugh at a joke unless he made it. We all know somebody like that, and they are annoying, and you just don't like them. It's like the world revolves around him. Anything that you say is wrong. He always came across as being better than because he had less than. There were some comments about this book being a bit pretentious, and yeah, it was, but I liked it because the way Nornega, the author, the way that she described certain things were so off the radar of what I would have expected somebody to write. There was a quote, and I can't remember what it was, and I don't have Goodreads open, so I can't say it word for word, but she compared the quick quietness of a person that she saw to the quick quietness of flies and roaches. And I thought that that was so artistic and so not wrong. The way that she described it. I'm like, how do you come up with these comparisons? How do you think of this? It just, I don't know. It was just so good. Literarily, this book is awesome. It's just that I didn't enjoy one of the perspectives. If I enjoyed that perspective, this easily would have been a 5-star book. And maybe this will be one that I go back to and I rate it 5 stars, kind of like what I did with the Yellow Wallpaper earlier this year. I had it originally as a 4-star book, but I bumped it up to 5 after thinking about it a little bit more, just because I think Nornega is such a good writer. You know, I was blown away by her writing and her prose that this book was just so well done. It's definitely not what I expected. It was definitely more romance with an upward inflection, but beyond, you know, not exactly being what I expected, it was very good. And Every Morning the Way Home Gets Longer and Longer by Frederick Bachman. Another Frederick Bachman. I read Anxious People earlier this year. This was a tearjerker. I mentioned this in my mid-year freakout video, I think. 70 to 75% of this book, this novella is a short one, were me either on the cusp of tears or, the tears actually falling from my eyes. Very sad. I listened to the audiobook for this one, so it's a good thing, because if I had a physical book in my hands, I would be blurry the whole time, and I know that I wouldn't have gotten through it probably as easily as I did. But this is the story of an old man. He has Alzheimer's, and a lot of it has to do with his interactions with his grandson, which are so sweet. And it's like you read these interactions and the tenderness of them, but you know that his mind isn't full. And it's so heartbreaking, because the grandfather is not cruel. He's not mean. He doesn't lash out in a way that's abusive or harmful. He's just existing in his world, and he thinks he's saying the right things, and isolated, he is saying the right things. He is striking up the right conversations, but it's just, with the context of it all, it's just so heartbreaking to read and to hear. However, I will say that another tender part, another emotional part of the story is how he, over the course of his life, or at least over the course of his grandson's life, how much he has influenced his grandson and the things that he says and the way that he behaves. Once again, Frederick Bachman is an incredible craftsman of character. The characters in this novella really touched my heart. I don't even think that this novella was supposed to be published, but it was, and I'm glad it was, because it's now one of my favorites. But the way Frederick Bachman goes in deep with the characters that he creates, it's so good. If you are a character reader, I think that you should give Frederick Bachman a try. He wheedles his way inside no matter what he writes. And I've only read 2 books, but so far that's been my experience. So far it's been 100%. And I know for a fact that I'm going to pick up this author again and read more books by him, and I'm probably going to have the same things to say, the same praise about his character work. But it's just so good. It's just so well done. Even though this one was sad, it was a tearjerker, I can still appreciate that and appreciate his craft and the way that he created his characters. Great novella. So happy to have read it. And this was a great month. There's only one book that I have left to talk about, and that is Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. I didn't get to finish it this month, but I'm still trucking. I'm still reading. I'm going to hopefully finish this in July and have this as part of the July wrap-up as well. But so far, this is such a cute book. Speaking of characters, I love the characters in this. Even if you're not a fantasy fan, I think that you would enjoy this book, because it feels like a book that you could easily replace with human characters in a modern setting. You're setting up a business for a first time. It's a coffee business, it's a cafe, but you would miss the charm that this book has. These characters are drinking coffee for the very first time. They don't know what it is. They're setting up this building for this orc named Viv, and there are so many unknowns. They're building this thing. They don't even know if it's going to be popular. They don't know if it's going to have any sort of draw at all. It's just like this newfound friendship coming together, figuring things out, building this cafe up. And it's just so charming. It's so cute. Again, if you don't like fantasy is not my number one genre, but I am enjoying this book so far very much. And the reason why I didn't finish it this month is because I wanted to save it for last. I wanted it to be the best for last, and I just didn't get to do it. So yeah, I do hope to finish this in July, and I hope to add it to my wrap up then. But otherwise, this has been my wrap up for June, and it's been a great month, other than one DNF and the Puzzle Master not quite meeting my expectations. All the other books I read this month were fantastic. They were great. I enjoyed them. So if you are interested in any of these books, their Goodreads links are down below in the description. Click on that, read the blurb, and if that convinces you, go over, find the retailer of your choice, and purchase them from there. Or if you're not quite sure but you want to give them a try, head on over to your library and borrow them, or use a library app and borrow them from there. Otherwise, I've been Jim. You've been great. Happy reading.